Welcome to video number 5 of my Getting Started series, Basic Stitches. In this video, I'm going to go over the common mistakes that absolute beginners make with their stitches. Now, if you do have other questions in regards to other things that may come up for you that aren't connected to stitches or that I don't go over in this video, just feel free to pop those questions in the comment section below so we can get to those for you. All right, when it comes to basic stitches, the very first thing that I see a lot of absolute beginners having trouble with is their tension. It's either super, super tight or super, super loose. Now, when it comes to tension, be patient with yourself. You are trying something brand new. Each hand is doing something completely different. You're working with different materials, you're working with different crochet hook sizes, and you just need to play and you need to get comfortable, and it will come. I do promise you, it will come where you will get the knack of it, get the hang of it, and the tension will just naturally become what you want it to be. But in the beginning, for an absolute beginner, yes, your tension may be super tight where every stitch is difficult to work in because the stitch space is so small that it's hard to get your crochet hook inside that stitch. Or the opposite, where your stitches are so loose that it's hard to understand what's going on or see structure or even understand what the stitch was supposed to look like. And that's okay. Please just be patient with yourself and keep practicing, and it will come. I promise. The second thing that I notice is a big mistake a lot of crocheters that are absolute beginners have is they don't want to count. They don't want to count their stitches. They just want to dive into the project. They want that comfortable, relaxing rhythm that just develops where you can just go and start putting your crochet hook in certain stitches and working stitches, and you're just working. And they don't count because counting isn't fun, and it's not always fun, and it can be a lot. It can be kind of tedious, right? Unfortunately, not counting can get you in a whole lot of trouble. It can put you in a situation where you're undoing a whole lot of work because you're noticing that maybe your work is starting to invert, where your work is starting to cave in a little bit on maybe on just one side where it's straight and then one side, and you're like, why isn't it staying straight? Or it's doing the opposite where it's growing outward and you're like, why is my blanket growing, or why is my project growing and not staying straight? I don't understand. That is a super common question that I get, and my common answer to each individual is, did you count your stitches? Because right off the bat, you will know immediately if a row is off because you counted and it's not the same number of stitches in one row as it was in another. So that is a huge recommendation I have for the absolute beginners. You're not there yet. You're not ready to just take off without counting. Yes, you can get to a point where you're working a pattern that is very repetitive and you can maybe go a row or two without counting and be fine. But even then, I will start saying in my patterns, I didn't in the very beginning when I was first working tutorials, but then I quickly realized, no, every couple rows you need to count just to make sure you're staying on track. I do it, and I'm an advanced crocheter. Every now and then, if I'm working a pattern and I get like 4 rows, I'll be like, you know what, I'm going to count my stitches in this row just to make sure, and count to make sure I'm on track. Or, oh no, I for some reason picked up a stitch or I dropped a stitch. Now is the time, 4 rows in, to make that correction so my work isn't constantly going like this or constantly going like that. I can fix it right away. So counting is super important to avoid those unstraight sides lines. And that is the third thing that I get a lot of questions on. The third mistake a lot of absolute beginners make is they can't seem to make the sides of their work straight. And again, what I'm going to mention is counting your stitches, number 1. The second thing you can do is use stitch markers. If you place a stitch marker in the very first stitch and the very last stitch of every row, then you have an idea of where you need to work up to before you move on to the next row. Sound good? Also, keep in mind the pattern. If it's just one stitch, maybe you're doing just half double crochet stitches, 1 half double crochet stitch in every stitch space. then you know, okay, I have to make sure there's a stitch here, and I need to make sure there's a stitch here in order for my sides to be straight. Okay, another thing is if it's a repeat pattern, maybe it's double crochet, single crochet, double crochet, single crochet, and it kind of has that pattern of double crochet, single crochet. Then at the very end, you should know after working a couple rows, okay, every row is supposed to go double crochet in with single crochet. Oh, my last stitch, I ended it on a double crochet. Why did I end on a double crochet? I'm not supposed to end on a double crochet. So then you can pick up the pattern and know, okay, I need to figure out where in this row I skipped a stitch or added an extra stitch. Fix this row. I will do this. If I end the row and it's not right, I will literally frog just that one row because I know that row is where I messed up because I've been keeping track. I've been following. And then I will redo it. And usually by redoing it, because I was paying more attention, it works out. Okay, so that's helpful too, the counting and the stitch markers. The fourth thing that I see is very common question, mistake that a lot of absolute beginners make is when their project either warps or curls. And you probably know exactly what I'm talking about here. If a blanket is warping and it has kind of like this, well, here, like I did with the circles, where it's kind of ruffling, warping, ruffling, you've added too many stitches or your tension is too tight and you're causing your stitches to come together really tightly in one section and maybe more loose in another section. So you're having a tension consistency issue. If your blanket is curling, that means your stitches are too tight because your stitches are just kind of like, they're grabbing amongst each other. They're just like, there's no room. I don't have any room to relax. There's no room to relax. I'm pulling. Everything is super tight. So there's two ways you can fix curling, and that is to use a larger crochet hook so your stitches are looser, or try to focus on your tension, work on your tension to have a looser stitch so it's not so tight. Or you can also try to block your project at the end, which just means when your project is finished, you've tied off all your ends, woven in all of your ends, you get your project, there's a couple ways to block. One, you can soak your project, just submerge it into water, let it absorb all the water, then lay it flat, pin it down to the way you want it to look, and then let it naturally air dry, and it will keep that shape when you remove the pins or whatever you use to clamp that blanket in place. Second way is to clamp the blanket in place first, make it straight, sides the way you want them to look, and then squirt it with a squirt bottle or steam it with the steam from an iron or the steam from a steamer. Don't touch the project with the iron. Do not touch the project with the steamer. Just allow the steam itself to touch the project. Relax those fibers, relax those stitches, and then naturally air dry so that way it keeps the shape that you desire. Okay, I do have a video on blocking. If you would like more visual, I can put a link here at the top of the screen for you to go to that video and learn about blocking for beginners. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm on 5. The fifth thing that is a common mistake for a lot of absolute beginners is their foundation row is either tighter or looser than every other row of their project. I get this question a lot. Why is my foundation row so much bigger than all my other rows? And my project kind of has this look of being wide and then coming in and then leveling out. Or the opposite, where it's my foundation row is so tight that it's shorter than my other rows, and for some reason my rows start to bow outward and then like almost bowl, where they bow outwards and then level off as you go up. Very common. The way you can fix this, a very common strategy is if your foundation row is tighter than the rest of your rows, then make your foundation row chain with a larger crochet hook. So that way it forces you to make looser stitches. And then for row 1, switch to the crochet hook you plan on using for the rest of the project and working that. And that seems to help to make your foundation row the same size as the rest of your blanket. If your stitches in your foundation row are looser, then do the opposite, where you make your foundation row with a smaller crochet hook than the crochet hook you're going to use for the rest of your project, and then it should balance itself out. And again, this is a tension thing, and you will get the hang of it. You will see how you're working too tight or how you're working too loose, and it will just come to you naturally with practice that your foundation row will start leveling out with the rest of your work. All right, sound good? Okay, the last mistake that I see a lot of absolute beginners make is increasing stitches or decreasing stitches in a row and not even knowing you're doing it. And when this happens, it does affect the count of the stitches in that row and causes that warping to happen. And it can either be a warp on the side or it can be a warp in the inner body of the project, where if you were to lay it flat, all of a sudden you see this weird bubble and you're like, that's weird. Oh, there must be a change in stitches there. And again, this is very common when you're not counting your stitches in your row and you just go, depending on the material you're working or the size of your stitches, you may add an extra stitch in the same stitch space as another stitch, or you may accidentally skip a stitch space. And as you're working, it just kind of bunches up right there because you skipped a stitch space, not realizing you did. And then it causes everything to kind of squish right there. All right, guys, those are the 6 different mistakes that I have heard absolute beginners make with their basic stitches. And again, that's tension, counting, straight sides, straight lines, warping or curling of your project, foundation row being shorter or longer than the rest of your work, and accidentally increasing or decreasing stitches within a row or round. Very common. If this happens to you, now you have some ideas on how to make quick fixes with that. And again, practice, practice, practice. You are going to have some of these happen. I still have some of these things happen, and I am an advanced crocheter level where it still happens. It just comes up. And be patient with yourself. That's what I really want to get across to you, is have grace, be patient with yourself, keep practicing, keep working at it. And with all 5 of these videos of my Getting Started series, Basic Stitches, watching these videos, perfecting, practicing, getting better, understanding everything a little bit more, you are already on your way to advancing on to the advanced beginner level, where you can really enjoy those projects, really enjoy those patterns, and have even more fun with more doors and more opportunities opening up to you to have fun and enjoy crochet. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to you checking out my next video. Bye, guys.